The wine glass was poisoned. Lisa Sanchez knew it. The man at table 7, the one whose presence made the entire restaurant move like a choreographed dance of fear, did not. She had 3 seconds. 3 seconds before Jae Min, one of the most dangerous men in New York, took a sip that would kill him. 3 seconds to stay invisible like she'd perfected over 2 years of 70-hour work weeks. 3 seconds to let a stranger die and keep her sister safe. She swapped the glass. That was 48 hours ago. This morning, men with guns asked questions outside her sister's dorm at NYU. Her name is Lisa Sanchez. She's a waitress who just wanted to survive long enough to pay off her mother's medical debt. She wasn't looking to save anyone. She wasn't looking to become a target. But in the world of organized crime, witnesses don't get to stay invisible. And good deeds? They have consequences written in blood. This is the story of how one quiet act of courage destroyed everything Lisa had built and forced her to become someone she never imagined she could be. Because what started with a poisoned glass ended with a war. If you don't subscribe, you'll never know if Lisa makes it out alive, if her sister is safe, if she gets justice. Don't be the person who ghosts her story right when it gets real. Subscribe now. Where are you from? Drop it below. Lisa had learned long ago that the best way to survive was to become a shadow. Present, but unseen. Efficient, but forgettable. At Luminaire, this skill had been refined to an art form. She moved through the dining room like water finding its path, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Clearing plates with hands that never trembled, never drew attention. The other servers called it grace. Lisa knew better. It was necessity. Tonight, she'd been assigned tables 7 through 10, tucked in the alcove where the lighting was softer and the music seemed to fade before reaching the leather banquettes. This was where Luminaire seated guests who paid for discretion as much as for the food. Business deals that couldn't be overheard, affairs that couldn't be photographed, conversations that would never appear in any gossip column. Lisa preferred this section. Fewer demands for performance, for the carefully practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Here, invisibility wasn't just accepted, it was required. She was refilling water glasses at table 9 when the atmosphere in the restaurant changed. It was subtle at first, like a collective held breath. The sommelier straightened his tie. The hostess touched her hair. Even Jean-Pierre emerged from the kitchen, his usually imperious expression replaced with something that looked almost like anxiety. Lisa didn't turn around. She finished pouring the water, set the pitcher on her tray with practiced silence, and only then allowed herself to glance toward the entrance. The man who entered moved with the kind of confidence that came not from arrogance, but from absolute certainty. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps early 30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting, all sharp angles and classical proportions. But it was his eyes that caught her attention as he swept past her section. They were the color of strong coffee, and they moved constantly, cataloging, assessing, missing nothing. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits flanked the doorway like bookends, their hands clasped in front of them in a way that didn't quite hide the bulge of concealed weapons. Lisa had seen enough television to recognize security when she saw it. She'd also worked at Luminaire long enough to recognize power. This man wore it like other men wore cologne. Expensive, noticeable, impossible to ignore. Jean-Pierre was at his table before he'd fully seated himself, his usual measured pace abandoned in favor of something close to scurrying. The maitre d' hovered nearby, practically vibrating with attention. Lisa watched from the periphery as water glasses were filled, menus presented, assurances given that the chef himself would be overseeing every aspect of the evening's service. Lisa. Marcus appeared at her elbow, his voice low. Table 7. Your section. She felt her stomach drop. I thought, change of plans. He requested the quiet corner. Marcus's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his jaw. Be perfect. Be invisible. Don't mess this up. Lisa didn't ask who he was. She didn't need to. She could see it in the way the entire restaurant had reoriented itself around his presence, the way even the other diners seemed to lower their voices, as if noise itself might be an offense. She approached table 7 with her tray balanced perfectly, her expression composed into pleasant neutrality. Up close, he was even more striking and more unsettling. Those watchful eyes tracked her movement as she set down the water glass, as her hands moved through the familiar choreography of presenting the wine list. Explaining the evening's specials. She kept her voice soft, professional, giving him the space to interrupt or dismiss her as he chose. He listened without speaking, those dark eyes never leaving her face. It wasn't the way men usually looked at her, not with interest or speculation, or the kind of casual appraisal she'd learned to deflect. This was different. He was studying her the way someone might study a chessboard, considering possibilities, calculating outcomes. Thank you, he said finally, his voice accented in a way she couldn't quite place. I'll need a few minutes. Lisa nodded, stepping back with the practiced smoothness that came from years of reading the unspoken language of service. As she retreated to the wait station, she could feel those eyes following her, feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Around her, the restaurant continued its careful dance, but she noticed how everyone gave table 7 a wider berth, how even the busboys found reasons to avoid that corner of the room. She didn't ask why. She never did. Questions led to answers, and answers led to involvement, and involvement was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had Maria's tuition to think about, her mother's debts still hanging over them like a sword. Whatever power this man represented, whatever fear he inspired in people who were supposed to be unshakable, it was none of her business. At least, that's what she told herself. The moment Jae-min stepped through the doors of Luminaire, the entire restaurant shifted into a different gear. Lisa noticed it immediately. The way Marcus straightened his already perfect posture, how the sommelier appeared from nowhere with a vintage bottle that hadn't been on any menu she'd ever seen, the subtle hand signals passing between the floor manager and the kitchen. This wasn't the usual VIP treatment. This was something else entirely. 2 men in dark suits had entered first, their eyes sweeping the dining room with the kind of practiced efficiency that made Lisa's bartender instincts prickle. Security. Real security, not the kind that stood outside nightclubs checking IDs. They positioned themselves at strategic points, one near the entrance, another with a clear sight line to Jae-min's table. The kind of positioning that said someone had done advance work, mapped exits, calculated angles. Jae-min himself moved through this choreography like he'd been born to it. Mid-30s, she guessed, with the kind of tailored elegance that came from having your clothes made rather than bought. He wore his wealth the way some people wore cologne. Subtly, but unmistakably. When he smiled at something Marcus said, it didn't quite reach his eyes. Those stayed watchful, always scanning, never quite settling. Lisa polished wine glasses and watched the performance unfold. The kitchen sent out an amuse-bouche she'd never seen before. The water in his glass was replaced before he'd taken more than 2 sips. A small army of servers orbited his table like satellites, attentive but never intrusive, there before he needed them, and gone before he noticed. Marcus himself stopped by 3 times in 15 minutes, each visit brief, respectful, leaving Jae-min to his phone and his thoughts, and whatever business required this level of careful handling. She was refilling the olive tray when Melvin Brown arrived, fashionably late as always. Melvin was a regular. Old money, the kind that didn't need to prove anything but somehow always did. He collected art and mistresses with equal enthusiasm, held court at Luminaire twice a week, and tipped exactly 20% every single time. Predictable. Safe. Boring. But tonight, something was different. Marcus seated him at his usual corner table, prime real estate with a view of the entire room. Melvin ordered his standard, the Dover Sole, a bottle of Chablis. But his attention wasn't on the menu or his phone or the young woman who'd accompanied him. His eyes kept drifting to Jae-min's table, studying him with an intensity that made Lisa pause mid-pour. She'd seen that look before. In her father's eyes, when he'd sized up a mark. In her own reflection when she'd been younger and stupider and thought she could play the game without getting played. It was the look of someone calculating, measuring, planning something that would benefit only themselves. Jae-min's phone rang, the actual ring, not a vibration, and he stood immediately, gesturing an apology to Marcus. He moved toward the entrance alcove, one of his security detail following at a discreet distance. Lisa watched him pass the bar, speaking rapid Korean into his phone, his earlier calm replaced by something sharper, more urgent. That's when Melvin moved. He excused himself from his table with a word to his companion, but instead of heading toward the restrooms, he angled toward the bar area, toward where Jae-min had been sitting, toward something. His movements had purpose, the kind of deliberate casualness that was anything but casual. Lisa's hands stilled on the glass she'd been polishing. That prickle of instinct that had kept her alive in Atlanta, that had warned her when situations were about to turn sideways. It flared hot and insistent now. Something was wrong. Something was happening. Melvin was doing something, planning something, and it involved Jae-min and this careful choreographed evening. She should say something, should tell Marcus, should at least keep watching. But then Melvin was past the bar, moving toward the restrooms after all, and Jae-min was returning to his table, and the moment dissolved into the ambient noise of crystal and conversation. Lisa released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding and went back to her olive tray, to her safe corner, to her role. It wasn't her business. It never was. That was the whole point of Étoile, of Luminaire, of this carefully constructed life. She poured drinks. She smiled politely. She collected her paycheck and minded her own damn business. Whatever Melvin Brown was up to, whoever Jae-min really was, it had nothing to do with her. Nothing at all. Lisa watched Jae-min excuse himself from the table, his movements unhurried as he made his way toward the restrooms. The moment he disappeared from view, she felt the air in the room shift, though nothing visible had changed. The murmur of conversation continued. Glasses clinked. Servers glided between tables with practiced grace. Everything appeared normal. Then she saw Melvin move. He had been standing near the bar, seemingly engaged in conversation with another guest. But now he was crossing the floor with deliberate casualness. Lisa's breath caught as he approached Jae-min's table, his path so perfectly timed it couldn't be coincidence. Her fingers tightened around the wine bottle she was holding. Melvin paused beside the table, his body angled to block the view from most of the room. Lisa was one of the few people positioned to see what happened next. His hand went to his jacket pocket in a movement so smooth it could have been innocent, reaching for a phone, adjusting his suit. But then came the pause, the briefest hesitation as his hand hovered over Jae-min's wine glass. The the one she had poured less than 10 minutes ago. A flash of something small and metallic caught the light. Or had it? Lisa's mind raced, trying to convince herself she'd imagined it. That the champagne from the incident earlier had affected her vision somehow. But her body knew the truth before her mind accepted it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat sending adrenaline coursing through her veins. Melvin's hand withdrew. He straightened his jacket, glanced around the room with an expression of mild interest, and walked away. The entire interaction had lasted perhaps 5 seconds. Anyone else would have seen nothing more than a man passing a table on his way to somewhere else. But Lisa had seen. She was certain she had seen. The wine glass sat exactly where she'd left it, the burgundy liquid undisturbed, reflecting the soft lighting like any other glass in the restaurant. There was no evidence, no proof, nothing she could point to and say with certainty that something had been added to it. Yet every instinct she possessed was screaming that the wine in that glass was no longer what she had poured. She stood frozen, the weight of what she might have witnessed pressing down on her like a physical force. Jae-min would return any moment. He would sit down, continue his meal, and eventually reach for that glass. And if she was right about what she'd seen, if Melvin had done what she thought he'd done, then what happened next could be catastrophic. But what if she was wrong? What if she intervened based on a suspicion, a flash of something that might have been nothing at all? She'd lose her job instantly. Hyun-soo had made his expectations brutally clear. One more mistake, and she was finished. And this wouldn't be a mistake. It would be a scene, an accusation, an unforgivable disruption of the carefully orchestrated evening. Her mind spun through the possibilities, each scenario worse than the last. If she stayed silent and was wrong, nothing would happen except she'd carry the weight of her paranoia. But if she stayed silent and was right... Jae-min emerged from the hallway, his stride confident, his expression neutral. He was heading back to his table, to that glass. Lisa moved without deciding to move. Her body acted while her mind was still calculating consequences, still weighing risks. She grabbed a fresh bottle of the same vintage from the service station and crossed the floor, her movements quick but controlled. She couldn't look frantic, couldn't look suspicious. She reached the table just as Jae-min did. "Welcome back, sir," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I noticed..." She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she let her hip catch the edge of the table as she reached across, just enough to set the wine glass rocking. It tipped, spilled across the white tablecloth in a spreading stain that looked like blood in the dim light. "Oh my God," she gasped, the horror in her voice completely genuine. "I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy." She was already moving, grabbing the soiled cloth, replacing it with fresh linen from her apron, pouring a new glass from the unopened bottle she'd brought. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, and she prayed he would attribute it to embarrassment rather than fear. Jae-min stood perfectly still throughout her flurried cleanup. When she finally dared to look up at him, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her stomach drop. His dark eyes held hers for a long moment, and in that gaze, she saw understanding. He knew. Somehow, he knew this wasn't clumsiness, wasn't an accident. The question in his eyes was clear. Why? Before she could think of any response, she felt it. The weight of another stare. She turned slightly and saw Melvin across the room. He stood near the bar, his champagne flute halfway to his lips, but he wasn't drinking. He was watching her, his expression no longer the pleasant mask of wealthy indifference he'd worn earlier. Something cold and calculating had replaced it, something that made her blood run ice cold. He knew what she'd done, and he knew that she knew. Lisa turned back to Jae-min's table, arranging the fresh glass with trembling fingers. "Again, my sincerest apologies, sir," she managed. "Please let me know if you need anything else." She retreated before he could respond, before her legs could give out beneath her. As she walked back toward the kitchen, she could feel Melvin's eyes following her every step. The weight of his gaze was like a hand pressing between her shoulder blades, a promise of consequences she couldn't yet imagine. Whatever she had just stepped into, it was far more dangerous than a ruined evening or a lost job. She had made herself visible to people who operated in shadows, had inserted herself into a game whose rules she didn't understand. And there was no stepping back now. Lisa told herself she was imagining things. The black sedan idling across from her building that morning. Just someone waiting for a friend? The man in the dark coat, who'd been standing on the corner when she left for work, then reappeared near the subway entrance. Pure coincidence. The city was full of people, full of black cars and men in coats, and 1,000 mundane explanations that made more sense than the knot of dread tightening in her stomach. But when her phone buzzed for the third time before noon, another unknown number lighting up the screen, her hands shook as she declined the call. "You okay, hon?" Marcy asked, sliding past with a pot of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Lisa forced a smile and wiped down the counter again, though it was already clean. "Just tired." The diner's usual breakfast crowd had thinned to a handful of regulars nursing bottomless cups and reading newspapers. The familiar rhythm of the place, the hiss of the griddle, the clink of silverware, the low murmur of conversation, usually soothed her. Today, it felt like background noise to the hammering of her heart. She kept glancing toward the windows, searching the street beyond for things that shouldn't be there, for men who watched too long, for cars that didn't move. When the bell above the door chimed, she looked up automatically. Order pad ready. And froze. Jae-min stood in the doorway, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He looked completely out of place among the worn vinyl booths and faded linoleum, yet somehow he commanded the space as if he owned it. His gaze found hers immediately, and something in his expression, resignation, perhaps, or grim determination, made her breath catch. He chose a booth near the back, away from the windows. Lisa's feet moved before her brain could argue, carrying her across the diner on autopilot. She stopped at his table, unable to speak. While every instinct screamed that his presence here meant the paranoia wasn't paranoia at all. "Coffee?" she managed finally. "Please." His voice was quiet, careful. "And a few minutes of your time. I'm working. This can't wait." She glanced toward Marcy, who was busy at the register, then back at Jae-min. The knot in her stomach twisted tighter. 5 minutes. She poured his coffee with hands that wanted to tremble, then slid into the seat across from him when he gestured to it. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, which made two of them. "The men watching you," he began without preamble. "They're not mine." Lisa's throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" "I'm the head of a Korean organized crime family, Ms. Dong Chen." He said it the way someone might announce they were an accountant or a lawyer, a simple statement of fact. "The man you saved me from 3 nights ago was sent by a rival organization. They've been trying to eliminate me for months. You interrupted their best opportunity." The diner seemed to tilt slightly. Lisa gripped the edge of the table. "That's insane." "I wish it were." Jaemin's gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. "Melvin Brown, the man who attacked me, works for them. And now you're a witness to a failed assassination. In my world, witnesses are liabilities that get eliminated. This is crazy. I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. Her voice rose despite herself, and she forced it back down. I helped someone who was hurt. That's all. That's all it takes. Something almost like sympathy flickered across his face. I'm sorry. You saved my life, and now yours is in danger because of it. Then tell them I won't say anything. Tell them I don't even know who you are, who you were. It doesn't work that way. He leaned forward slightly. They don't take chances. They don't leave loose ends. The moment you pulled me into that alley, you became a problem they need to solve. Lisa thought of the black car, the watching men, the unknown numbers, her apartment with its flimsy lock and ground floor window. So what am I supposed to do? Let me protect you. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Protect me? You're the reason I need protecting. Yes. He didn't flinch from it. And that's why I'm responsible for keeping you alive. I want no part of this. She started to stand. I want no part of your world or your wars or whatever this is. I'm nobody. I serve coffee and I mind my own business and I just want to be left alone. Jamin caught her wrist, gently but with enough firmness to stop her. His eyes were dark and serious and completely devoid of reassurance. Refusing my help won't make you safe, Ms. Chen. It will only make you an easier target. They're already watching, already planning. The only question is whether you face them alone or with someone who knows how to fight back. Lisa pulled her hand free, heart hammering. Around them, the diner continued its ordinary rhythm, oblivious to the extraordinary nightmare unfolding in the back booth. She wanted to run, wanted to scream. Wanted to rewind 3 days and walk past that alley without stopping. But she couldn't. And looking into Jae-min's face, she knew he was telling the truth. Lisa stared at the termination letter, the words blurring together as her hands trembled. Inappropriate conduct with a guest and breach of professional standards stood out in bold, clinical language that somehow made Melvin's lies feel official. He'd filed a formal complaint 3 days after she'd helped Jae-min, claiming she'd been drinking on duty and had made unwanted advances. The hotel's management hadn't even asked for her side of the story. She walked out of Luminaire for the last time, with her few belongings in a cardboard box, past colleagues who wouldn't meet her eyes. The doorman who used to greet her warmly looked away. In less than a week, she'd gone from employee of the month to persona non grata, and the worst part was she couldn't even defend herself. How could she explain what had really happened without revealing what she'd seen? Who would believe her anyway? The next morning, Lisa checked her bank account to calculate how long her meager savings would last, and froze. There was an extra $15,000 sitting in her checking account. Then another deposit appeared as she watched. $20,000 this time. Her stomach dropped. She knew exactly where it was coming from. She called her bank immediately, hands shaking as she explained there had been some mistake, but the representative confirmed the deposits were legitimate wire transfers. No mistake. No way to refuse them. Lisa stared at the screen of her phone long after the call ended, feeling like the money was burning a hole through her account, through her phone, through her entire life. She couldn't spend it. Wouldn't spend it. That money was a chain, a marker, a receipt for something she'd never agreed to sell. The call from Maria came on a Tuesday evening. Her sister's voice was tight with fear in a way Lisa had never heard before. There was a man outside my dorm today. Asian guy, really well dressed. He asked if I was Maria Chen, if I had a sister named Lisa. When I wouldn't answer, he smiled and said to tell you that you have a lovely family. Lisa felt the floor drop out from under her. Her hands went numb. "Where are you now?" "In my room. I locked the door. Lisa, what's going on? Who was that? Why would someone—" "Stay there. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to fix this." Lisa hung up before Maria could ask more questions, before her voice could crack completely. She had Jae-min's number, had stared at it for days, telling herself she'd never use it. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She'd tried so hard to keep Maria separate from all of this, to protect her from the choices Lisa had made. But her good deed, that single moment of human decency in a hotel hallway, had painted a target on both their backs. Jae-min answered on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." "Someone approached my sister." Her voice was hollow. "Stay away from her. Whatever you think you owe me, we're even. Just leave us alone." There was a pause. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle in a way that somehow made everything worse. "Lisa, that wasn't one of my people. That was someone trying to get to me through you. The moment you helped me, you became visible to people you should never have been visible to. I can make you invisible again, but you need to trust me." "I don't trust you." "I know. But do you trust that I understand how these things work better than you do?" She closed her eyes. Hated him. Hated Melvin. Hated herself most of all. "What do I need to do?" 2 hours later, a black SUV picked her up. By midnight, she and Maria were in a penthouse apartment in Tribeca, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson. There were 2 men in dark suits stationed in the hallway, another in the lobby. Maria sat on the leather couch, hugging her knees, looking smaller than she had since middle school. "I'm sorry," Lisa said for the 10th time. "I'm so sorry." Jae-min stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city lights. "In my world, there are rules that matter more than laws. You saved my life. That creates a bond, a debt that doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. I didn't ask you to help me, but you did. Now I'm responsible for keeping you safe. Not because I want to, not because you want me to, but because that's how this works." "I just wanted to do the right thing," Lisa whispered. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. The right thing always costs something. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price, or whether you'll let someone else pay it for you. Maria looked between them, frightened and confused, and Lisa realized with crushing certainty that her sister would never look at her the same way again. The person Maria had believed in, the responsible one, the one who'd worked 2 jobs to help pay tuition, who'd always chosen the safe path, was gone. In her place was someone who'd stumbled into a world of violence and debt, of favors that could never be repaid, and protection that felt like a cage. She'd saved a life. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. Lisa followed Jae-min through a door she would have sworn wasn't there 5 minutes ago. The restaurant's storage room gave way to a narrow hallway, then stairs that descended into what felt like the earth's cold embrace. Her hand found Maria's, squeezing tight. "Where are we going?" Maria whispered, but Jae-min didn't answer. The basement wasn't what Lisa expected. No exposed pipes or flickering bulbs. Instead, warm light spilled from recessed fixtures, illuminating a space that looked like it belonged in a corporate boardroom. 6 people sat around a polished table, their conversations dying the moment Jae-min entered. "You brought her here?" A woman with silver-streaked hair spoke first, her English crisp despite a heavy accent. "Are you insane?" "Careful, Sun-hee." Jae-min's voice carried a warning. "She saved my life. Or she's working with whoever wants you dead." This from a younger man, lean and sharp-eyed. "Convenient, isn't it? She happens to be there, happens to warn you, happens to get caught up in the whole thing." Lisa's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on surviving the immediate danger that she hadn't considered how it might look. A nobody server, at the right place at the right time, now standing in what was clearly a very private room with very dangerous people. "I don't know what you think I am," she said, finding her voice, "but I'm just someone who needed a job." "Nobody is just someone in Seoul." Sun-hee leaned forward. "Especially not Americans who take work visas in Itaewon restaurants. What are you really doing here?" "Living." The word came out sharper than intended. "Working. Trying to give my daughter something better than we had back home. That's it. That's the whole boring story." "Then why help him?" The young man gestured at Jae-min. "Why not run?" Because running was what she'd always done. Because for once in her life, Lisa wanted to stand still and fight. But she couldn't say that to these strangers who looked at her like she was a puzzle they needed to solve before she exploded. "Would you have?" She met his gaze. "If you saw someone about to die, would you have walked away?" Silence stretched between them. Maria's hand trembled in hers. Jae-min moved to the head of the table. "I'm offering her a choice. Relocation. New identities for her and her daughter. Papers, money, a fresh start somewhere far from here." Lisa's heart lurched. Everything she'd wanted, handed to her. Safety. Distance. The chance to disappear so completely that no one, not Melvin's people, not these suspicious faces around the table, not her own past, could find them. "Where?" she asked. "Canada, Australia, several options in South America." Jaemin's expression was unreadable. "You'd be comfortable, protected." For how long? The question surprised her, but once asked, Lisa realized she already knew the answer. "Melvin knew where I worked. He chose my section deliberately. How many others in that restaurant were watching? How many people does he have scattered across this city?" Sun-hee's expression shifted slightly. Not quite approval, but something close to respect. "She's right," the older woman said. "If they targeted her once, changing locations might not be enough." "Then what do you suggest?" Jae-min asked, but his eyes were on Lisa. The smart choice would be to take his offer. Grab Maria and run as far as this dangerous man's money could carry them. Start over in a place where Korean gang wars were someone else's problem, where her daughter could grow up without looking over her shoulder. But Lisa had been running her whole life, from her mother's boyfriends, from bill collectors, from the future that seemed determined to swallow her whole. And look where it had gotten her, trapped in a basement with people who thought she might be sent to kill them. "I'll help you," she said. The words felt like jumping off a cliff, but on my terms. "You think you're in a position to negotiate?" The young man's laugh was harsh. "I think I'm the only person in this room who knows that restaurant from the inside." Lisa's voice steadied as the decision crystallized. "I know the staff, the regulars, the patterns. You want to know who else was involved? I can help you figure it out. But Maria stays safe. You protect her, no matter what happens to me. And when this is done, we get those new identities anyway. That's the deal." Jae-min studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. For a moment, Lisa thought he might laugh, might tell her she was delusional to think she had any leverage at all. Instead, he nodded once. "Done." "You can't be serious," Sun-hee started. But Jae-min raised a hand. "She's right. We need someone on the inside." He turned back to Lisa. "But understand what you're agreeing to. These people don't forgive loose ends. If they realize you're working against them, I know." Lisa did know. She could feel it in her bones, the weight of what she'd just chosen. But for the first time in years, she wasn't running. She was standing still. staking her claim to ground that might swallow her whole. She was done being invisible. Whatever came next, at least it would be her choice. Lisa's hands didn't shake as she tied her apron strings, though they should have. The wire taped between her shoulder blades felt like ice against her skin, a constant reminder that one wrong word, one suspicious glance, could end everything. She'd spent the morning in a FBI van 2 blocks away, memorizing her cover story until it felt like truth. She'd been sick, nothing serious, just needed a few days to recover. Simple. Believable. A lie that could keep her alive. The lunch service at Luminaire unfolded with its usual balletic precision, but Lisa moved through it like a ghost haunting her own life. Every smile felt painted on. Every "yes, chef" tasted like ash. She watched Bernard move through the dining room with his characteristic elegance, and couldn't stop seeing him as he really was. A man who'd sold another human being for whatever price Melvin Brown had offered. When Melvin arrived for his regular Wednesday reservation, Lisa's heart hammered so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. He settled into his usual corner table, spreading out like a king claiming territory. The afternoon light caught the heavy gold of his watch, the sheen of his tailored suit. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who believed the world existed to serve him. Well, well. His smile didn't reach his eyes as Lisa approached. "Look who's back from the dead. Heard you were feeling poorly." "Just a bug," Lisa said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Nothing serious." "Funny thing about bugs." Melvin leaned back, studying her with the intensity of a scientist examining something under glass. "Sometimes they're just bugs. Sometimes they're symptoms of something worse. Cancer, for instance. Starts small, spreads, kills you before you even know you're sick." Lisa forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I'll have the salmon today, I think." "Smart girl, knowing when to keep things simple." He tapped the menu with one manicured finger. "Not like some people. That Korean boy, for example, came in here thinking he owned the place. Didn't understand how things work. Didn't know his place." His smile widened. Accidents happen to people who don't know their place. The wire burned against her skin. Lisa could feel the FBI agents listening, recording every word. She took his order, salmon, medium rare, the 82 Chateau Margaux, and walked back toward the kitchen on legs that felt like water. But she didn't go to the kitchen. Instead, she detoured through the staff corridor, past the wine cellar to the manager's office. Through the half-open door, she could see Bernard at his desk, his usually composed face tight with stress. He was on the phone, his voice low and urgent. "I gave you what you wanted," he was saying. "The reservation details, the seating chart, everything. We had a deal, Melvin." Lisa's blood turned to ice. "No, I don't want more money. I want out. This wasn't supposed to—" He paused, listening. "I delayed the wine service like you asked. I made sure he was alone at the table for exactly 7 minutes. I did my part." 7 minutes. That was all it had taken for them to poison Jae Min's drink. 7 minutes that Bernard had orchestrated. Lisa backed away silently, her mind racing. The sommelier. Had he been part of it too? How deep did this conspiracy go? How many people in this restaurant that she'd trusted, worked beside, laughed with, were part of something that had nearly killed Jae Min? She returned to the dining room on autopilot, served Melvin his salmon with hands that no longer shook because she was beyond shaking now. She was cold, calculating. She watched him eat with the satisfaction of a man who believed he'd won. And she thought, "Not yet. Not while I'm still standing." That night, the world exploded into violence. Lisa was at the safe house with Jae Min when the attack came. 3 men with guns, moving with military precision through the shadows. But Jae-min's security was better. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes, ending with the attackers retreating into the night and one of Jae-min's guards bleeding from a shoulder wound. In the aftermath, as sirens wailed in the distance, Lisa stood in the living room surrounded by shattered glass and understood with perfect clarity what this meant. Melvin Brown wasn't just powerful. He was connected enough to find them, bold enough to attack them, confident enough to believe he was untouchable. Running wouldn't work. Hiding was temporary. The FBI's investigation would take time they didn't have. "We can't just survive this," Lisa said quietly, looking at Jae-min across the wreckage. "We have to end it." He met her eyes, and she saw her own determination reflected back. "Then we end it." The plan was madness, and Lisa knew it. Yet here she was, nodding as Jae-min explained how he intended to use her as bait. "They think you're the weak point," he said, his finger tracing a radius on the map of her neighborhood. "They'll come for you to force my hand. But this time, we'll be ready." Lisa's apartment, her home, the place where she'd once felt safe enough to sleep with the windows cracked open in summer. Now it would become a trap, and she would be the lure dangling in its center. "What if something goes wrong?" Maria's voice cut through from the doorway. She'd been listening, her face pale with worry. "Then I die," Lisa said simply. "But at least we'll know who's behind this. At least Jae-min can end it." "No," Maria said. "No, you don't get to be noble about this. You've already—" "I agree to her terms," Jae-min interrupted, his eyes on Lisa. "But only if Maria is moved first. Somewhere truly safe. Somewhere even I can't find her." Lisa met his gaze. For once, they understood each other perfectly. "Deal." The next 36 hours moved in a blur of preparation. Maria was relocated to a property 3 hours north, owned by someone Jae-min described only as outside the game entirely. Lisa watched her friend pack with trembling hands, memorizing the curve of her shoulders, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was anxious. "This is insane," Maria whispered as they embraced goodbye. "You know that, right?" "I know." Lisa held her tighter. "But I'm the one who pulled you into this. I have to be the one who gets you out." When Maria left, escorted by 2 of Jae-min's most trusted guards, Lisa felt something inside her chest crack and resettle. There was no going back now. There was only forward into whatever waited. The night of the plan, Lisa sat in her apartment and tried not to count the minutes. Jae-min's team had wired the place with cameras and set up positions in the building across the street, in the stairwell below, in the maintenance room above. She was surrounded by protection, yet she'd never felt more exposed. She made tea, let it grow cold. Made more tea. The shadows outside her window shifted as evening deepened into night. Normal shadows, she told herself, just trees and streetlights, but her hands shook as she gripped her cup. 9 o'clock became 10. 10 became 11. At 11:47, her phone buzzed. Jae-min. "They're moving. Stay calm. We have you." Lisa's heart began to hammer against her ribs. She stood, then sat, then stood again. Where should she be when they came? The kitchen? The living room? Should she pretend to sleep? The decision was made for her. At 11:53, she heard the first sound, a soft scraping at her door lock. Professional. Practiced. Not even trying to hide it because they thought she was alone. She backed toward the bedroom, fear turning her blood to ice water. The lock clicked. The door eased open. 3 men entered, moving like smoke, their faces covered. "Lisa Chen," the first one said softly. "You're coming with us." She opened her mouth to scream, but before any sound could escape, her windows exploded inward. Jae-min's team poured through the door, the walls, everywhere at once. The fight was brief and brutal. The intruders were good, but they'd walked into a kill box. Within 90 seconds, all 3 men were on the floor, zip-tied and bleeding from minor wounds. Conscious, alive. That had been the plan. They needed them alive. Lisa sank against the wall, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Jae-min appeared at her side, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You're safe. It's over." But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The interrogation took 4 hours. Lisa didn't watch, didn't want to know what methods Jae-min employed. But when he returned to her at dawn, his face was grim with revelation. "Han-soo," he said. "Do you know that name?" She shook her head. "He runs a rival faction. We've been competing for territory, for influence." Jae-min's jaw tightened. Melvin was his plant. Everything, the harassment, the intimidation, the attack on Maria, it was all designed to provoke me, to make me act rashly, to give Han-soo an excuse to move against me openly. Lisa felt the weight of it settling over her like fresh snow. "So, when I fought back against Melvin, you exposed a war that's been brewing for months. Han-soo thought he could use Melvin's position, his vendetta against you, as cover for something larger, but you wouldn't break. And when I got involved, you became the perfect pressure point." "My small act," Lisa whispered, "standing up to one terrible man, revealed an entire conspiracy." Jae-min looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You were never just a victim, Lisa. You were the match that lit the fuse." Outside, dawn was breaking over the city. Somewhere, Maria was safe. Somewhere, Han-soo was making his next move. And here in this broken apartment, Lisa understood. She'd escaped nothing. She'd only stepped deeper into the labyrinth. But this time, she wasn't walking in blind. The warehouse smelled of old concrete and diesel, its high windows casting pale squares of light onto the floor. Lisa stood beside Jae-min, her hands steady despite the weight of what was about to happen. Across the vast, empty space, Han-soo's representatives waited, 3 men in dark suits who looked like they'd been carved from the same expensive stone as their boss. Melvin knelt between them, his face a mess of bruises that had nothing to do with Lisa. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, his expensive watch conspicuously absent. When his eyes found hers, she saw something she'd never expected. Fear. Not of death, but of irrelevance, of being discarded. "Ms. Santos," one of Han-soo's men began, his English precise and cold. "You have caused considerable inconvenience." Jae-min stepped forward before Lisa could respond. "She witnessed a crime. That's not inconvenience. That's liability." His voice carried the same authority it had that first night at the restaurant. But now Lisa understood what lay beneath it. Not just power, but the willingness to use it. The recording device sat on a metal table between them, small and unremarkable. Lisa had already given her statement. Every detail about the restaurant, the shooting, Melvin's late-night visit to her apartment. Her voice, preserved in digital memory, had been copied and distributed to 3 separate parties with instructions that were crystal clear. If anything happened to her, everything went public. To the police, to the media, to immigration authorities who would be very interested in certain business practices. Mr. Han wishes to make clear, the spokesman continued, his jaw tight, that Mr. Kim acted without authorization. His employment has been terminated. He violated protocols. He will answer for that. Terminated. Such a corporate word for such a brutal reality. Lisa watched Melvin's shoulders slump, watched him realize that he'd gambled everything on a play that had never been sanctioned. He'd seen an opportunity to impress, to rise, to prove himself indispensable. Instead, he'd become a liability. And in this world, liabilities didn't get second chances. Justice within appropriate channels, Jae-min said softly. Not the law's justice, but something older and less forgiving. Lisa felt nothing watching Melvin being hauled to his feet. Not satisfaction, not guilt. Just the quiet certainty that this chapter was closing. Han-Su's men left first, dragging their former colleague toward whatever fate awaited him. When the warehouse door clanged shut, the silence felt enormous. The protection stands regardless of faction politics, Jae-min said, turning to her. It's been witnessed, recorded. You're untouchable now. Lisa nodded, understanding what he wasn't saying, that untouchable was a cage of its own kind. She'd never be truly free of this world, not entirely, but she'd be safe. And sometimes safety was freedom enough. 6 months later, Lisa stood in the fluorescent-lit corridor of the community college, her nursing textbook heavy in her arms. The tuition had appeared in her account through channels so clean they squeaked. Investments, returns, a settlement from the restaurant that Maria had accepted without question. Her sister knew only that Lisa had been brave, had testified about unsafe working conditions, had won. The classroom door ahead bore a simple sign, Anatomy and Physiology. Inside, 30 students who'd never stood in that warehouse, never watched a man realize his life was forfeit, never learned that survival sometimes meant becoming visible at the exact moment you most wanted to disappear. Lisa's phone buzzed. Maria, asking about dinner. She typed back quickly, promising to bring groceries, to cook her mother's recipe for adobo that she'd finally mastered. She'd kept her promise. Maria was safe, their family intact, the bills paid. But more than that, she'd kept a promise she hadn't known she'd made to herself. To live. To be seen. To take up space in the world not as a ghost slipping through shadows, but as a woman who'd faced the worst and emerged intact. The old Lisa would have sat in the back corner, head down, invisible. This Lisa walked to the middle row, set her books down firmly, and met the professor's eyes when he scanned the room. When he asked for volunteers to read aloud, her hand rose without hesitation. Here, that gesture said. I'm here. And for the first time in her life, that felt like exactly where she belonged. One small decision can change everything. Lisa's courage in that single moment at table 7 didn't just save a life. It saved her own in ways she never expected. She learned that ordinary people can make extraordinary choices, that sometimes the most dangerous thing is doing nothing at all. The final image shows Lisa at nursing school, confident and present, no longer the invisible woman who served tables in fear. She's become someone who acts when others look away, someone who understands that true safety doesn't come from hiding, but from having the courage to stand up when it matters most. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.